Hi, welcome to the Silent Avenger channel. If you're enjoying the content, please consider giving it a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into today's story. So, here's the thing about me and Christmas. We don't get along. Never have. To say I dislike it would be an understatement. Hate feels closer to the mark. People call me a Grinch or Scrooge, but they don't know the half of it. My story goes deeper than not liking tinsel or Mariah Carey on repeat. It all started when I was 8. My parents, good old Mary and Frank, decided to do the whole Santa surprise thing. My dad hired this local guy to show up at our house in a Santa suit on Christmas Eve. It sounded magical at first, until Santa got drunk, knocked over the tree, and broke my favorite toy. The worst part? He yelled at my mom when she tried to calm him down. Merry Christmas, right? It didn't stop there. As I got older, every major disappointment seemed tied to Christmas, and more often than not, to a man in a Santa suit. There was the time I got rejected by my high school crush during a holiday dance. Guess who she left with? The guy dressed as Santa. In college, my girlfriend cheated on me at a Christmas party. You guessed it, her partner in betrayal was some dude wearing a cheap Santa hat. Even professionally, Christmas brought bad luck. My first boss, who fired me a week before Christmas, handed me the news while wearing a Santa tie. It's like a cruel joke the universe keeps playing on me. Now, at 37, I'm a successful mechanical engineer working for a chaotic tech firm that somehow survives on sheer audacity. I'm good at my job, even if I'm surrounded by corporate lunacy. My coworkers call me Chris the Grinch, a nickname I've stopped fighting. Every December, the office turns into a holiday nightmare of mandatory secret Santas, cheesy decorations, and potlucks where everyone pretends to enjoy Karen's mystery casserole. But this year, the ultimate insult, a holiday party at my boss's house, complete with an after-hours costume contest. The theme? You guessed it, Santa's workshop. The invitation came with a smug little note that said, "Don't be a Grinch, Chris." I tried to get out of it. I even faked a scheduling conflict. But my boss, Mr. Work Hard, Party Harder himself, wouldn't let me off the hook. Said it was a team-building exercise. Team building? More like torture. Little did I know, that party would turn into the most chaotic, ridiculous, and strangely liberating night of my life. When the day of the holiday party came, I was dragging my feet the whole way. I'd been planning on skipping, but my coworker Melissa guilt-tripped me. She pulled the classic, "You never join us for anything, Chris. Don't you want to feel included?" line. As if I cared about blending into their holiday cheer cult. I caved and threw together a costume, if you could call it that. A cheap Santa hat and a red t-shirt that said, "Santa's worst elf." I thought it was funny. Melissa said it was pathetic, but she dragged me along anyway. We carpooled to the boss's house. The guy lives in one of those neighborhoods where every house has a 5-car garage and a perfectly symmetrical lawn. His house practically screamed, "I own you," with its towering Christmas lights synced to an obnoxiously loud holiday playlist. Inside, it was even worse. Think Christmas threw up everywhere. Garlands, stockings, fake snow, and one of those massive trees that looked like it belonged in Rockefeller Center. There was even a hired Santa impersonator standing by the fireplace for pictures. I avoided him like the plague. The party was everything I hated about the holidays. My boss, Ted, was already tipsy and forcing everyone to try his homemade eggnog. Karen from HR cornered me to talk about her cat's holiday sweaters. Meanwhile, Melissa kept abandoning me to flirt with some guy in a reindeer sweater. But the worst part? They announced a Santa-off contest. Whoever wore the best Santa costume would win a special prize. Ted made it clear that everyone had to participate, whether they came dressed as Santa or not. Of course, my worst elf shirt put me at the bottom of the barrel. I figured I could just ride out the humiliation and leave early. Then something strange happened. In the middle of Ted's booming laughter and Karen's cat stories, a text buzzed on my phone. It was from my wife, Jessica. "Jessica, hey, just checking in. How's the party?" That alone was odd. Jessica never texted me during work functions. She called them boring engineer stuff. I fired back a quick reply. "Me, terrible. Why do you care?" Her response came almost instantly. "Jessica, just curious. Don't get too drunk, okay?" Something about her tone set off alarm bells. It felt off. But before I could dwell on it, Ted clinked a glass and called for everyone's attention. All right, folks. It's time to crown the ultimate Santa, he announced, swaying slightly from the eggnog. Melissa nudged me. You're really not even going to try? Come on, Chris. For once, just go with the flow. I looked around. Most people had gone all out, velvet suits, fake beards, even toy sacks. I stood no chance. But then Ted added, for those of you without a proper costume, we've got extras. No excuses. Before I could protest, someone shoved a cheap Santa suit into my hands. It smelled faintly of mothballs and regret. Just put it on, Chris, Melissa urged, her eyes sparkling with the kind of holiday enthusiasm I despised. What's the worst that could happen? I should have known better than to tempt fate. I don't know why I put the suit on. Maybe it was the half glass of Ted's eggnog kicking in, or maybe I was tired of Melissa's needling. Either way, I found myself in the bathroom, wrestling with the ill-fitting Santa suit. The pants were too short, the belt was cracked faux leather, and the beard, well, let's just say it looked like something a cat coughed up. But when I looked in the mirror, I almost laughed. If the goal was to be the saddest Santa at the party, I was winning by a landslide. When I stepped back into the living room, the reactions ranged from amused to outright mocking. Ted slapped my back so hard I nearly choked. Now that's the spirit, he bellowed, his breath reeking of rum and nutmeg. See, folks? Even Chris the Grinch can get into the holiday mood. Melissa gave me a thumbs up, clearly pleased with herself. You're kind of pulling it off, she said, though her smirk betrayed how ridiculous I looked. Great, I muttered. Can we get this over with? Ted dragged me toward the other contestants, by the fireplace. There were at least a dozen people in Santa costumes, each more elaborate than the last. One guy had LED lights sewn into his coat. Another had a reindeer sidekick, his golden retriever, antlers and all. And then there was me, standing there like a thrift store reject. The judging began, with Ted acting as the overly enthusiastic MC. He cracked corny jokes, exaggerated everyone's outfits, and kept the crowd engaged. When it was my turn, he squinted at me theatrically. Ladies and gentlemen, I present Discount Santa, he declared, sending the room into a fit of laughter. Or is it Santa after a rough night in Vegas? I gave a mock bow, deciding that if I couldn't win, I'd at least play along. The crowd seemed to appreciate my self-deprecating attitude, clapping harder than I expected. Still, it was clear I wasn't taking home the prize. Just as the contest wrapped up and Ted moved to announce the winner, something happened. My phone buzzed again. Jessica, don't come home too early. I stared at the message, my stomach twisting. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Before I could type anything, Melissa poked me. Earth to Chris. Ted's about to announce the winner. At least pretend you're interested. Right, I said absently, slipping my phone back into my pocket. My mind was racing. Why wouldn't Jessica want me home early? It wasn't like we had plans, just a quiet night in, like always. And the winner is LED Santa. Ted proclaimed, holding up the guy with the light-up coat like he was the heavyweight champ. The crowd erupted into cheers as the guy accepted his prize, a bottle of top-shelf whiskey. I tried to force a smile, but my head wasn't in it anymore. Something about Jessica's texts didn't sit right. I pulled Melissa aside, lowering my voice. Hey, can you give me a ride back? I asked. I think I've had enough holiday cheer. She frowned. Already? Chris, it's barely 9. You okay? Yeah, I'm not feeling it. Please. Melissa studied me for a moment, then sighed. Fine, Grinch. But you owe me. As we headed for the door, Ted shouted after us, leaving so soon, Chris? You're gonna miss the after party. Rain check, I called back, already halfway out. The drive back to my house was uncomfortably quiet. Melissa tried to make small talk, but I wasn't in the mood. My mind kept circling back to Jessica's texts. Something wasn't right. She knew I hated these parties, so why was she acting so weird about me coming home? When we pulled up to my place, I thanked Melissa and got out. She rolled down the window before driving off. Hey Chris, she said, hesitating. Whatever's bothering you, don't let it ruin your night, okay? It's Christmas. Yeah. Sure, I replied, forcing a weak smile. The second her car disappeared, I turned toward the house. It was dark, except for the faint glow of Christmas lights Jessica had strung along the porch. My stomach churned as I unlocked the door. Inside, everything seemed normal, at first. The living room was tidy, the faint scent of cinnamon candles lingering in the air. But then I noticed something off. 2 wine glasses sat on the coffee table, one with a faint lipstick mark. Jessica never drank wine alone. I walked into the kitchen, my heartbeat picking up. The sink was empty, but there was an open bottle of Cabernet on the counter and a half-eaten charcuterie board nearby. "Jess." I called out, my voice echoing in the quiet house. No response. I checked the dining room, then the den. Empty. My pulse quickened as I climbed the stairs to our bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear faint whispers. Pushing the door open, I froze. There she was, Jessica, sitting on the edge of the bed, laughing softly at something. And next to her? A man I didn't recognize. He was tall, with dark hair and a smug grin that made my blood boil. They both turned to look at me, their expressions shifting from surprise to something else. Guilt? Annoyance? I couldn't tell, and honestly, I didn't care. "Chris," Jessica said, standing up quickly. "You're home early." I stared at them, my chest tightening. Yeah, well, I wasn't exactly in the holiday spirit. What's going on here? The guy stood up, casually adjusting his tie like he hadn't just been caught in another man's house. "Relax, man. We were just talking." I laughed bitterly. "Talking, huh? That's why you're sitting on my bed? Who the hell are you?" "Chris, stop," Jessica snapped. "This isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Because it looks like you invited some guy over while I was at a party I didn't even want to go to." She crossed her arms, her defensiveness fueling my anger. "You're overreacting. This is Daniel. He's a colleague." "A colleague?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Do all your colleagues hang out in our bedroom at night?" Daniel held up his hands, as if to calm me down. "Look, man, I think I should go." "That's the smartest thing you've said all night," I growled, stepping aside to let him pass. He walked out, brushing past me without another word. The sound of the front door closing felt deafening in the tense silence that followed. I turned back to Jessica, who was staring at me with a mix of frustration and something else I couldn't quite place. "Explain," I demanded. "Now." Jessica sighed and sat back down on the bed, avoiding my eyes. "It's not what you think, Chris." "Then tell me," I said, folding my arms. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty bad." She hesitated, running a hand through her hair. "Daniel and I work together. He's going through a rough patch. His divorce just got finalized. He needed someone to talk to. And that someone had to be you? At night? In our bedroom." My voice was cold, and I could feel my hands clenching into fists at my sides. "Chris, stop acting like this," she snapped, finally meeting my gaze. "You're always so paranoid." "Paranoid?" I laughed bitterly. "You realize how shady this looks, right? If the roles were reversed and I had some woman up here while you were out, you'd lose it." "That's different," she muttered, looking away again. "Different how?" I demanded, stepping closer. "Because you're Jessica, and I'm supposed to just trust you unconditionally while you keep pulling stunts like this?" Her jaw tightened. "Nothing happened, Chris. But honestly, maybe I wouldn't have to talk to someone else if you weren't so cold all the time." The accusation hit me like a punch to the gut. "Cold? Are you kidding me?" "You don't even try anymore," she shouted, standing up. "Every day it's the same. Work, eat, sleep. You barely even look at me. I needed someone to talk to, and you weren't there. That's your excuse?" I fired back. "You feel neglected, so you invite some guy over and cozy up to him in our bedroom?" "It wasn't like that," she yelled, her voice cracking slightly. "You're twisting this into something it's not." I shook my head, the anger giving way to a sinking sense of betrayal. "You know what? I don't even care if you kissed him or not. The fact that you thought this was okay? That's enough for me." "Chris, please," she said, her tone softening. "I messed up, okay? But you've been checked out for months. I needed someone to listen. And I needed a wife who wouldn't betray me the second things got tough," I shot back. "Looks like neither of us got what we wanted." The words hung heavy in the air. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could see tears welling up in her eyes, but I didn't care. Or maybe I cared too much. Either way, I wasn't about to let her off the hook. "I'm sleeping in the guest room," I said finally, turning toward the door. And tomorrow? We're having a serious conversation about where we go from here. Chris, she called after me, her voice trembling. Don't do this. Not now. It's Christmas. I stopped in the doorway, not bothering to look back. You should have thought about that before you brought him here. I closed the door behind me and headed for the guest room, my chest tight and my mind racing. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Daniel sitting on my bed, grinning like he belonged there. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Jessica bustling around in the kitchen. For a split second, I thought everything might have been a bad dream. But then I saw the crumpled Santa suit in the corner of the guest room and the empty bed beside me, and it all came rushing back. I dragged myself out of bed, my head pounding from a restless night. Jessica was at the stove, flipping pancakes, humming to herself like it was any other morning. When she saw me, she gave a tentative smile. "Good morning," she said softly. "I made breakfast." I didn't respond, just grabbed a mug and poured myself some coffee. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Chris," she started, her voice hesitant. "Can we talk? About last night." I sipped my coffee, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I set the mug down and looked at her. "Go ahead." She set the spatula down and turned to face me fully. I meant what I said. Nothing happened with Daniel. It was stupid of me to invite him over, and I'm sorry if it hurt you. But I wasn't trying to. To what? Cheat on me? I interrupted, my voice colder than I intended. Because it sure felt like you were heading in that direction. Her eyes flashed with anger. "That's not fair, Chris. I didn't do anything wrong." "Nothing wrong." I set the mug down harder than I meant to. "You invited another man into our bedroom, Jessica. Do you get how that looks? How that feels?" She folded her arms, her frustration matching mine. "Do you get how it feels to live with someone who's emotionally checked out? You've been distant for months, Chris. You're here but you're not here." I opened my mouth to argue but stopped. The truth was, she wasn't entirely wrong. I had been pulling back, long hours at work, avoiding conversations that felt too heavy, letting the distance grow because it was easier than confronting it. But that didn't justify what she'd done. "I know I've been distant," I said finally. "But that doesn't give you a free pass to whatever that was last night." Jessica sighed, the fight seeming to drain out of her. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I really didn't." I leaned against the counter, my mind racing. I wanted to believe her, but trust didn't come easily to me. Not after everything I'd been through. "I don't know if I can move past this," I said quietly. "Not without some real changes." Her face fell, but she nodded. "I want to fix this, Chris." "I do. Just tell me how." "I don't have the answer right now," I admitted. "But I know we can't keep going like this." The room fell into silence again. Eventually, I turned back to my coffee, and she went back to flipping pancakes. We ate in near silence, the weight of the conversation hanging over us like a dark cloud. The silence after breakfast was unbearable. Jessica cleaned up the kitchen like she was trying to scrub the tension away, while I sat in the living room nursing my second cup of coffee. The holiday decorations she put up weeks ago, cheerful stockings, twinkling lights, and a garish ceramic Santa on the mantel, felt like they were mocking me. By mid-morning, I couldn't stand being in the house. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Jessica called from the kitchen. "Out," I replied without turning around. "For how long?" I shrugged. "I don't know." "Don't wait up." I heard her sigh but didn't stop. The cold air hit me as I stepped outside, a welcome relief from the stifling tension in the house. I got in my car and started driving, no destination in mind. I ended up at a nearby park, a quiet place I used to go when I needed to think. The walking trail was nearly deserted, save for a few joggers bundled up against the winter chill. I found a bench overlooking the frozen pond and sat down, the weight of last night pressing heavily on my chest. Jessica's words replayed in my mind, "You're emotionally checked out." Was she right? Had I been distant? Maybe. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. I thought back to when we first got together. Back then, things had been easy, fun even. She was the outgoing, lively one who pulled me out of my shell. I admired her energy, her warmth. But somewhere along the way, life got in the way. Work got harder. Responsibilities piled up. And maybe I let the spark fade without realizing it. But inviting Daniel into our bedroom? That wasn't just a cry for attention. That was crossing a line. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I half expected it to be Jessica, but it wasn't. It was Melissa. Melissa, hey, you okay? You seemed off last night. I stared at the message for a moment before replying. Me, I'm fine. Just dealing with some stuff at home. Her response came almost immediately. Melissa, want to grab a coffee? Talk about it? I hesitated. Melissa and I had always been friendly, but I wouldn't call her a confidant. Still, the idea of talking to someone who wasn't Jessica was appealing. Me, sure. Meet you at Java Jolt in 20? Melissa, see you there. When I walked into Java Jolt, Melissa was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 steaming cups in front of her. She waved me over, her usual bubbly demeanor tempered by concern. Hey, she said as I sat down. You look like you haven't slept. Thanks for that, I muttered, taking a sip of the coffee she'd ordered for me, black, just how I liked it. She chuckled softly, but her expression quickly turned serious. What's going on, Chris? You've been acting off lately. I hesitated, debating how much to share, but the words spilled out before I could stop them. It's Jessica, I admitted. Last night, I came home and found her in our bedroom with another guy. Melissa's eyes widened. What? Are you serious? Dead serious. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand through my hair. She says nothing happened, but I don't know. It's hard to believe her. Melissa frowned, her brows knitting together. Do you think she's telling the truth? I want to, I said, my voice low. But even if she is, the fact that she thought it was okay to bring him there, that's hard to get past. She nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. That's not okay. I don't even know what to say. We sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the cafe filling the space between us. Do you think you can work through it? Melissa asked finally. I don't know, I admitted. I'm not even sure where to start. Well, she said, giving me a small, encouraging smile. For what it's worth, you don't have to figure it out all at once. Just take it one step at a time. I nodded, appreciating her effort to help, even if I wasn't sure how much it would actually change things. As we left the cafe, Melissa gave me a quick hug. If you need to talk again, you know where to find me. Thanks, I said, meaning it. But as I drove home, the knot in my chest tightened. I wasn't sure if talking had helped or just reminded me how much there was to figure out, and how little I wanted to face it. When I got back home, the house was quiet. Jessica was nowhere to be seen, and for a second, I wondered if she'd gone out too. But then I heard faint noises coming from upstairs. I followed the sound and found her in our bedroom, tidying up. Hey, she said when she noticed me in the doorway. Her voice was cautious, like she wasn't sure which version of me she was about to face, the calm one or the ticking time bomb. Hey, I replied flatly. She set down the pile of clothes she'd been folding and turned to me. You were gone a while. I needed air, I said, not elaborating. Jessica bit her lip, then gestured toward the bed. Do you want to sit? Maybe talk. I already said everything I needed to this morning, I replied, leaning against the doorframe. She sighed, clearly frustrated. Chris, we can't just leave things like this. We have to figure out how to move forward. Move forward. I echoed. You make it sound so simple, Jess. Like we can just forget what happened and go back to normal. I'm not saying that, she said quickly. I know it's not that easy. But I don't want to lose us, Chris. I don't want this to be the thing that breaks us. Her words tugged at something deep inside me, but I wasn't ready to let my guard down. Not yet. I need time, I said, my voice quieter now. Time to think. To figure out if I can even trust you again. Jessica nodded, her shoulders slumping slightly. I get that. I do. Just, don't shut me out completely, okay? I didn't respond. Instead, I turned and walked back downstairs, needing space. Later that evening, I found myself in the garage, tinkering with an old project to distract myself. It was a half-assembled model train set I'd been working on sporadically for months. Normally, the meticulous work calmed me, but tonight, my mind kept drifting back to Jessica and Daniel. What exactly was their relationship? She claimed it was innocent, but the details didn't add up. Why was he comfortable enough to be in our bedroom? Why was there wine and food like they were having some kind of date? I tried to shake the thoughts, but they gnawed at me. Finally, I gave in and grabbed my phone. I opened Jessica's social media accounts, scrolling through her posts and friends list. It didn't take long to find Daniel. His profile was public, which made things easier. He worked at the same company as Jessica, and his feed was full of photos that painted a picture of a charming, successful man. Smiling selfies, group shots at work events, posts about his hobbies, running marathons, cooking elaborate meals, and apparently woodworking. But then something caught my eye. A photo from a few weeks ago. It was at a work Christmas party I hadn't attended, and there was Jessica, standing next to Daniel, both of them smiling. She had her hand lightly on his arm. The caption read, "Celebrating the holidays with great colleagues." I stared at the photo, my stomach twisting. Was I reading too much into it? Or was this proof that their friendship was closer than she'd let on? I closed the app and set my phone down, my mind racing. By the time I went back inside, Jessica was curled up on the couch, watching some Hallmark Christmas movie. She glanced at me as I walked in, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat down in the armchair across from her. For a while, we just sat there in silence, the cheerful music and overacted dialogue from the movie filling the room. "Chris," she said finally, her voice tentative. "Yeah. I know I messed up," she said, her eyes fixed on the TV. "And I know you're still upset. But I want to fix this. I need to fix this." I took a long sip of my beer, then set the bottle down. "We'll see," I said simply. It wasn't the answer she wanted, but it was all I could give her. The days that followed felt like walking on thin ice. Jessica and I danced around each other, exchanging polite but strained conversations. Every now and then, I'd catch her watching me, like she was trying to gauge how much damage had been done. For my part, I couldn't shake the image of that photo. Her hand on Daniel's arm, the easy familiarity in their smiles, it gnawed at me. But instead of confronting her about it, I kept it buried, hoping the space would help me sort through the chaos in my head. Then, on a quiet Wednesday evening, the ice cracked. I came home late from work, exhausted after a day of back-to-back meetings. Jessica was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. "Hey," she said, glancing up as I walked in. "Dinner's almost ready. I made your favorite, spaghetti carbonara." It was a nice gesture, but instead of appreciating it, I felt suspicious. Like she was trying to butter me up. "Thanks," I said, setting my bag down. I sat at the table while she served the plates, the aroma of garlic and pancetta filling the air. She set a plate in front of me and sat across from me, her expression hesitant. "So," she began, twirling her fork in her pasta. "How was work?" "Fine," I said shortly. She nodded, taking a bite. "Listen, Chris. I've been thinking. Maybe we should take a weekend trip. Just the two of us. You know, to get away and reconnect." I set my fork down, staring at her. "Reconnect." She nodded again, her tone overly optimistic. "Yeah. We could go to that cabin we rented last year. Remember? You loved the hiking trails there." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "And this is supposed to fix everything?" Her face fell. "I didn't say that. I just thought it might help." "Help what, Jessica?" I asked, my voice rising. "Help me forget that you brought another man into our house? Into our bedroom?" Her shoulders tensed. "Chris, I told you, nothing happened. And I'm just supposed to take your word for it?" I interrupted. She set her fork down, her tone defensive. "What do you want from me? I've apologized 100 times. I've done everything I can to make things right, but you won't even try." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "Maybe because it's hard to try when I can't even trust you." Jessica stood too, her eyes flashing with frustration. "This isn't just about me, Chris. You've been distant for months. You shut me out, and then you're surprised when I look for support elsewhere." "Support?" I scoffed. "That's what you call it?" "Yes," she shot back. "Because that's all it was. You're the one turning it into something more." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. "You know what, Jessica? Maybe you're right. Maybe I am the problem. But that doesn't change the fact that you crossed a line. And I don't know if I can forgive that." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But instead, she took a deep breath and looked at me with a mixture of anger and sadness. "Then maybe you need to decide if this is something you even want to fix," she said quietly. Her words hung in the air, heavy and final. Without another word, she grabbed her plate and walked into the living room, leaving me standing there, my appetite gone. That night, I slept in the guest room again, staring at the ceiling as Jessica's words echoed in my mind. Decide if this is something you even want to fix. Did I? For the first time since this all began, I wasn't sure of the answer. The next morning was quiet, too quiet. Jessica and I went through our routines like strangers living under the same roof. She sipped her coffee at the kitchen table while scrolling through her phone, and I packed my lunch in silence. "Have a good day," she said softly as I grabbed my bag and headed out. I paused in the doorway, her words hanging in the air. For a moment, I wanted to turn around, say something, anything, to bridge the growing chasm between us. But I didn't. "Yeah," I muttered, walking out the door. At work, I tried to focus, burying myself in projects and avoiding unnecessary conversations with my coworkers. But no matter how much I distracted myself, Jessica's words from the night before kept playing in my mind. By lunchtime, I'd had enough. I pulled out my phone and opened Daniel's profile again. The more I scrolled, the more convinced I became that there was more to his relationship with Jessica than she was admitting. A thought struck me, and before I could overthink it, I called Melissa. "Hey Chris," she said, her voice bright. "What's up? Can you meet me for coffee after work?" I asked. "Sure," she said, sounding surprised. "Everything okay?" "I just need to ask you something," I said vaguely. We met at Java Jolt again, this time at a small table near the back. Melissa looked curious, if a little concerned, as she sat down with her chai latte. "So," she said, leaning forward. "What's on your mind?" I hesitated, not sure how to phrase it without sounding paranoid. "You know Jessica's coworker, Daniel?" Melissa raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, I've met him a couple of times." "Why? What's he like?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. She frowned slightly, clearly puzzled by the question. "He's fine, I guess. Charming, confident, kind of a flirt." "Why?" I tapped my fingers on the table, debating how much to say. "Do you think he and Jessica are close?" Melissa's eyes widened slightly. "Are you asking if something's going on between them?" "I don't know," I admitted. "She says it's nothing, but I can't shake the feeling there's more to it." Melissa was quiet for a moment, then leaned back in her chair. "Look, I don't know what's going on with them, but if your gut's telling you something's off, maybe you should trust it." Her words hit harder than I expected. "I just don't know if I'm overreacting," I said, running a hand through my hair. "Chris," she said gently, "you're not the kind of guy who jumps to conclusions. If you think there's something to worry about, there probably is." I nodded, appreciating her honesty. "Thanks, Melissa." She gave me a small smile. "Anytime. And hey, if you need help figuring things out, let me know." On the drive home, my mind was racing. Melissa's words echoed in my head. "If your gut's telling you something's off, maybe you should trust it." When I got home, Jessica was in the living room, watching TV. She glanced at me as I walked in but didn't say anything. "Hey," I said, setting my bag down. "Hey," she replied, her voice cautious. I hesitated, then sat down on the edge of the couch. "We need to talk." She muted the TV, turning to face me. "Okay." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I need to know the truth, Jessica. About you and Daniel. All of it." Her face paled slightly, and she looked away. "Chris, I've already told you." "No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "No more half-truths or excuses. I deserve to know what's really going on." She bit her lip, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "There's nothing going on," she said finally. But what?" I pressed. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "But I did let things get too familiar. I liked the attention. I liked feeling wanted again." Her admission hit me like a punch to the gut. "I didn't cheat on you," she added quickly. "I swear. But I crossed a line, and I'm sorry." I stared at her, trying to process her words. Part of me wanted to believe her, but another part couldn't ignore the nagging doubt in the back of my mind. "We'll see," I said finally, standing up. "But if you want to fix this, you need to prove it. No more lies. No more secrets." Jessica nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I will. I promise. I wanted to believe her. But trust isn't something you rebuild overnight. Jessica's promise to prove herself lingered in my mind, but doubt was like an unwelcome guest that refused to leave. Over the next few days, she made an effort to show she was committed, cooking meals, asking about my day, and even suggesting we attend counseling. On paper, it looked like she was trying, but I couldn't shake the unease. Something still wasn't adding up. That Friday, while Jessica was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A notification lit up the screen, a message from Daniel. The temptation was instant and overwhelming. I knew it wasn't right, but my gut was screaming at me to look. So I did. The message was short but raised every alarm in my head. Did you tell him yet? My heart pounded as I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. Tell me what? I thought, my stomach twisting. I glanced at the bathroom door, the sound of the shower still running. Acting quickly, I opened their message thread. Most of their conversation history had been deleted, but a few messages remained. Daniel, I can't believe he came home early. Jessica, it's fine. I'll handle it. Daniel, you sure? Jessica, yes. Just stop texting for now. The messages were from the night I found them in the bedroom. My chest tightened as the puzzle pieces fell into place. She told me nothing happened, but this? This looked like damage control. I closed the messages and put the phone back where I found it, my mind racing. Jessica came into the kitchen a few minutes later, her hair damp and wrapped in a towel. She smiled when she saw me. Hey, she said, reaching for her phone. I forced a smile, my insides churning. Hey. She checked her phone casually, her expression unreadable. Dinner plans tonight? She asked, trying to sound light-hearted. I'm not sure, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Maybe we can order in. She nodded, seemingly relieved. Sounds good. That night, I couldn't sleep. The messages played on repeat in my head, each word cutting deeper. Did you tell him yet? What was she hiding? I needed answers, but I didn't want to confront her without proof. Instead, I decided to take a risk. The next morning, when Jessica left to run errands, I made my move. I opened her laptop and accessed her email. She didn't have it password protected, and my hands trembled as I searched for anything that could shed light on her relationship with Daniel. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for, a folder of archived emails labeled work stuff. Buried among meeting notes and project updates were several emails from Daniel. Most were innocent enough, but one caught my attention. Subject: about last night. Daniel, I know we agreed not to talk about it, but I just want to say, I can't stop thinking about you. I hope we didn't make a mistake. Let me know if you want to meet again. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a colleague offering friendly support. This was someone who thought they'd crossed a line, and wasn't sure if it should have stopped there. When Jessica came home later that afternoon, I was waiting for her in the living room. Chris, she said, setting down her bags. What's wrong? I stood up, holding her phone in one hand and a printout of Daniel's email in the other. You need to start talking. Right now. Her face went pale. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice shaky. I held up the printout. This. And the messages you didn't think I'd see. Did you tell him yet? Tell me what, Jessica? She froze, her eyes darting between me and the paper. Chris, I can explain. Don't, I interrupted, my voice low and steady. Don't lie to me again. Just tell me the truth. Her shoulders sagged, and she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. It was a mistake, she said. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lonely, Chris. I felt invisible. And Daniel, he made me feel seen again. My chest tightened, but I kept my composure. How far did it go? She hesitated, tears streaming down her face. We kissed. Once. And I stopped it. I told him it couldn't happen again. I stared at her, my mind racing. And the messages? The emails. He kept pushing, she said. I didn't want to tell you because I knew it would destroy us. I thought if I ended it quietly, we could move on. Her words hit like a hammer. She'd crossed the line, lied about it, and only confessed when backed into a corner. I need space, I said, my voice cold. Don't follow me. I grabbed my coat and walked out the door, my world collapsing around me. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, my mind a storm of anger, betrayal, and confusion. Jessica's confession had shattered whatever fragile foundation we had left. I thought about calling Melissa or even just parking somewhere to sit in silence, but I couldn't stop thinking about the look on Jessica's face as she told me everything. Her tears. Her excuses. Her lies. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of a nearby lake. It was a spot I'd gone to in college whenever life felt too overwhelming. The winter air was sharp as I stepped out of the car, the lake frozen over, its surface a mirror for the dull gray sky. I leaned against the car, staring out at the frozen water. How did it get to this? For years, I thought Jessica and I were unshakable. Sure, we had our problems. What couple didn't? But I never imagined she'd betray me like this. And Daniel, the smug face from that night flashed in my mind, reigniting the anger simmering beneath the surface. I wanted to hurt him. Not physically, but emotionally. I wanted him to feel the same sense of betrayal I did. But no amount of payback would fix the mess I was in now. By the time I got home, it was late, and the house was dark. Jessica was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her face puffy from crying. She sat up as I walked in, her expression hopeful and nervous. "Chris," she started. I'm not ready to talk," I said firmly, cutting her off. Her shoulders sagged, and she nodded. "Okay." Without another word, I headed upstairs to the guest room. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying everything she'd said, everything I'd read. The next morning, Jessica was waiting for me in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. She looked like she hadn't slept. "I made an appointment for counseling," she said softly. "For both of us. It's next week." I stared at her, my emotions a tangled mess. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." Her lip quivered, but she nodded. "I get it. But, when you are, the offer's there." I grabbed my coffee and sat across from her, the silence between us heavy. The weekend passed in a haze. Jessica gave me space, but every interaction between us felt strained and unnatural. I couldn't stop wondering if I was making the right choice by staying, or if staying at all was even an option. On Sunday afternoon, Melissa called. "Hey," she said when I answered. "How are you holding up?" "Honestly? Not great," I admitted. "Well," she said hesitantly, "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but I ran into Daniel yesterday." My grip on the phone tightened. "What?" "He was at the grocery store," she said. "He didn't see me, but he was talking to someone on the phone. And Chris," he mentioned Jessica. "What did he say?" "He said something about giving her time and that she needed to come around. I don't know exactly what he meant, but it didn't sound good." My stomach churned. "Thanks for telling me, Melissa. You okay?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm going to find out." That evening, I confronted Jessica again. "I need to know if you've been in contact with Daniel since this all started," I said bluntly. She froze, her face paling. "Chris, Don't lie to me," I interrupted. "If you're still talking to him, I deserve to know." She hesitated, then sighed. "He's texted me a few times. But I haven't responded. I swear." I searched her face for any sign of deception, but I couldn't tell if she was being honest. "If I find out you're lying," I said coldly, "this is over. No counseling. No second chances." Jessica nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm not lying, Chris. I promise." For now, I decided to take her at her word. But the nagging doubt in the back of my mind refused to let go.